So I'm just introducing our panel, and we want to continue talking about the way forward that Rasmus just mentioned, that we don't know what it looks like, but maybe we have some good examples in the room. So here we have Simon Jacoby. He's from Switzerland. He is also a political scientist and a journalist, and in 2015 he was part of a group of journalists in Zurich who started a local newsroom, a local media outlet called tsüri.ch. And he is also part of a movement which is called Media for the Future in Switzerland, who is trying to connect similar, as I understand it, new media endeavors, trying to talk exactly about what Rasmus has just laid out as like what's coming up in the future. To my left is Lea Korsgaard from Zetland in Denmark. You are a co-founder and editor-in-chief of Zetland, which is among, I think, the most successful media outlets in Europe targeting young people, and we will hear about how you do that. And I think Zetland has for many years also in the established industry provided moments of awe in how to tackle this audience that everybody wants to get in touch with, the people under 25. You have 50 plus fully staffed members at Zetland already, and your audience is one of 40,000 paying members, which is impressive. And then over here, I'm happy to have Katharina Binder. She develops partnerships and supports potential funders of the Media Forward Fund, which is a new initiative. We have been part of the journey to get the Media Forward Fund off the ground in this summer. And Katharina brings to the Media Forward Fund many years on the experience on the publishing side of things. She's been with Die Zeit for quite some while, but the last almost 10 years, you spent at a local publishing company in Germany. So Katharina knows exactly what we are talking about if we're talking about the failures of some of the local publishing houses around. So Simon and Lea, I think it's important for the people in the room who don't know your media outlets very well yet. If you can say a little bit, is like what was at the start of your journey? How did you identify like the gap in the market? Like why did you think this is a piece of the audience that doesn't have the information or the journalistic offering it needed? And then, yeah, how did then the journey start towards building the media outlet that you're now running?
I think I have to admit that we started with ourselves. That we, and when I say we, I mean myself and my 3 co-founders, we were young back then, and we were missing a way. We missed 2 things, I think. One was a media that was really designed for my use, the way I wanted to seek out information, which means a media that really took technology seriously. So that was one thing. And the other thing was we missed journalism that was told in a way so that I could feel that it was told by a human person. Someone that I trusted, someone that a person whose intentions with telling the story that I could feel or know. And that's simply just another way of telling stories that we are used to. We don't learn that in journalism school, basically. So we wanted to make like a high quality newspaper that publish only little every day, 2-3 stories, but do it in this very, I don't want to say personal, but in a tone of voice that I, as a member or as a listener or reader, feel welcomed and at home. So that was basically. I think maybe what I'm trying to say here is that we knew that there was a crisis and still is a crisis in the legacy news business, and I really think that this crisis is not only a business model crisis, but it is a style crisis. There's something with the style that just puts people off.
Thank you. Thank you, and we will hear more about what is it that you did then, and maybe Simon, you can just follow up for tsüri.ch. What was it in your local, kind of a city community that you thought was missing?
Yes, thanks for the invitation and congratulations to this opening of this House of Journalism. It's really nice here. So when we founded tsüri.ch, we had two big questions. First, is it possible to launch a local media that's purely digital? And secondly, is it possible to get a younger audience interested in political topics? So this younger audience was underserved by the big media companies back then. And now, 10 years later, we have a team with 13 people. And so we can say, yes, it's possible to launch a digital media. And yes, it's possible to get a younger audience interested in political topics if you address them directly, if you build up a community. And yeah, if you talk to them on an eye level, if you try to engage them, if you don't see the users as passive consumers but as active community members. So I think the two big problems of the media landscape, the financing crisis and the decreasing trust, can be solved by a strong community. Because if you are true in the communication to your audience, then the trust will increase, and if somebody trusts you, then they are more likely to pay for a membership or an abo.
Were there specific measures you took to get in touch with the community you wanted to reach with Tsüri Day? Like, did you, I don't know, do events or invite people to specific topics? How did you kind of start to build this relationship?
We started with trial and error, and now we have a digital community or digital involvement process, and also offline. So we do a lot of polls, for example, or we let them bet on the results of an upcoming referendum, or we organize a lot of events. We organize from 20 to 30 events every year, and this goes from panel discussions like this to workshops, city walks, and so on. And there we can get in touch with the people. So our journalists can talk to them from face to face, can listen to their feedback, and the people can ask their own questions to politicians and experts. So I think it's really important for a higher social impact of journalism if the people can connect the content to an offline experience, combined with the online journalism, of course.
Mm-hmm. Rasmus, would you say what you heard from Lea and Simon, this is part of the story of failure or the lack by established media companies to identify these needs of younger people in these two specific cases? Have they at some point just stopped to really kind of look at who's the audience I reach and who do I not reach, and innovate in these spaces?
First, I want to be very clear that I know a lot of really smart and kind people in the news industry, and everybody else's job is easy when you look at it from a distance. So when I am about to say something rude, it's not meant to be judgmental, but it's simply, I would say that the what I described in my opening remarks as the sort of unearned arrogance of an industry that forgot why it was king of the hill is a sort of sickness that has infiltrated the profession of journalism and the news media industry, and created the situation where companies essentially took sort of a Henry Ford type approach, that you could get any kind of news that you wanted as long as it was the one they were producing already, and in the formats that they preferred from a business point of view. And I just have to say, look, I mean, look around. If you operate in the world that I described as the past, the low-choice environment where people didn't have much of a choice, you can get away with that. But if you operate in the most competitive attention economy in the history of our species, and you say the only thing you can do is the thing that you're already telling me every day that you don't want, the results are not surprising, I have to say. I mean, I'm sorry to be a bit rude about it. And I also want to be very clear that when I said that rearguard action sometimes is an understandable or even justifiable approach, that, you know, if you are running a news organization and you have, you know, the prime minister shouting at you on the phone about a story that he or she, you know, found was, you know, unfair or wrong or something like that in the morning, and, you know, your subscribers are literally dying and your advertisers are paying their money to Mark Zuckerberg and whatnot, and your shareholders are like, where is our money? And you have a goal for the next quarter. Look, there's only 24 hours in the day. Sometimes, you know, you have to sort of focus on the problem in front of you. So I'm not judging the individuals involved. I'm just saying that the forces at play are when you step away from the sort of fierce urgency of now and the sort of constant busyness that characterizes editorial offices and business suites and news organizations are obvious. Like, it's a gray Reno problem. It is right there. It's big. It's charging straight at us. And it will hit us if we don't move. I mean, so it's very clear.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for being so. And then I think a round of applause. You're telling me, as somebody who has worked in this industry for the last 15 years, it's not often that people are so frank about the situation we are in. And Katharina, with launching the Media Forward Fund initiative this summer, and now you're being part of this for a couple of weeks, I think only. I think it would be great to hear a little bit about how you approach this, you know, this issue of the gaps in the market that, as Rasmus just said, basically also by being just really, really overworked, and part of the problem being that we are under high pressure in the industry to keep on producing what we have been good at. How does the Media Forward Fund try to change that? What kind of impulse does the Media Forward Fund want to give?
Yeah, first of all, the Media Forward Fund was started to fund the development of media outlets with a special focus on underserved regions or communities. So this is the definition what we want to do. So it's not that we fund everyone. It's really that we have a look, is there really a gap in the market? And is there a clear position? Is the content that is produced really focused on the users, on the target groups? Is there a clear position? And that's what we've learned, what media outlets have to have if they want to be future ready. And that's why we are judging this point very, this one is really important.
Now, the Media Forward Fund, just to get you in the picture, is receiving applications by media innovation projects or entrepreneurs and wants to give out tickets up to 400,000 euros for a 2 or 3 years period, I think, that people can use this money to get their innovation off the ground. And I just wanted to ask you, how did you get Zetland off the ground? Was there similar support? What was really important in terms of support to start this? And then just then following up on this, I would love to hear a little more about how you then really went about targeting this young audience that you thought, you know, was there to be targeted.
Yeah. So when it comes to the economic side of the story, we got a small grant, not small, but compared to how much money we needed, a small grant from the government, and then we made a crowdfunding campaign telling about the vision for Zetland, and got 1,500 people to put some money into this project that didn't exist yet. That was not enough to sustain the whole business, but it was enough for us to go to private investors and tell them that we were not only 4 weirdos in a backyard or in a garage. You know, we had 1,500 backers behind us, so it was kind of a market test. And then we raised, I think it was 4 million euros. I'm so bad at math, and we're still in Danish kroner, but around 4 million euros to get launched, and then I think then we grew, and then we didn't grow as much as we needed, so we were still burning a lot of money. Then we invested in very traditional marketing tricks like TV ads and ads in newspaper papers. And that worked to some extent, but also not, for two reasons. One was simply just there was not enough people coming in through these ads, but also it was really hard to convey our mission, we want to be a place for focus, a place for like community-based, as sort of a place to go if you really want to engage in deep storytelling, and that's really hard to convey that mission in a 30-second TV slot. So that didn't work, and then eventually we, in order to break even, we just set it as it was at that point. We need to grow, otherwise we're going to close this thing down. And we need your help. At that point, I think we had like around 9,000, 8,000 paying members. We need your guys' help to grow. Go ask a friend, go ask a colleague, go ask a family member to become member of Zetland. And they did. And through that, we reached break even. And ever since, every year, we have replicated this campaign. We call it the yearly ambassador campaign. So our community, our members, simply help us grow. It's 30% of our annual growth that comes from this campaign. And I just find it the most meaningful way to grow as a media is through word of mouth. Right now we're in the middle of this campaign. We want 5,000 new members. We have 1 week left almost, and we just gained 4,500 new members. It's amazing, and that's because of the relationship that we're building with the community. Okay, so that was a long story about how to break even, but I think it's what I want to say here is that... I have a question
about retention of these people, because I know that, in the, traditional media and the ones who are better off than others are the ones that have a successful subscription business model now in the online space. But their biggest problem is to keep the people at the subscription, sure. Right? And how does that, how does this compare to your experience with these membership growth model?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you have to, it's going to sound like I'm bragging, but you have to make a kick-ass product. Because journalism, at least in my opinion, it's a product. It has to build habit. It has to be worth paying for, worth spending your time on. So in our case, like really building a product that people can relate to, think is valuable, getting to know the journalist, and building a habit around the product. That's just central. In our case, the average member spends 5 to 7 hours a month on the product, which is quite good. I want that to grow because I want to compete with Netflix and Spotify. But if the product doesn't work, then the business model doesn't work.
Thank you so much. That's so inspiring. And Simon, maybe just to give the same question over to you, how do you make sure that people in Zurich see tsüri.ch as part of their life? Because I think this is especially for a media outlet that is part of a local community, a city community. They really need to think. I think this is part of our Zurich. And maybe you can give us a few of the things that, what are the stories you're reporting on specifically to create this feeling, or what are the topics for these events that you mentioned that people really care about?
Well, I think one of the most important channel or format to create this feeling is our daily newsletter, the Zürich briefing it's called. And we write this at night, and the newsletter is pretty long, and it offers the subscribers the most important news of the day. But it's not like in school or in some other boring place. We work really hard to establish a warm and charming tone of voice, so that over 15,000 subscribers, we want them to wake up and that they are really looking forward to read this mail as the first thing in the morning. And I think this is very important for this community feeling, and the newsletter doesn't sound very sexy or innovative or fresh, but it offers us a direct communication with every community member. I think that this is very important, and on the other hand, the events are very important for this community feeling, to get together and have a nice evening with some content and inputs. And as one of the main topic overall over the newsletter and the events and the online magazine is the housing crisis in Zurich. We have very few flats available, and the rents are going up every month. So this topic for the renters is underserved by the big and traditional media companies. So I think this is our spot where we belong.
Can I add something just super briefly? What I think, what you say about tone of voice is so important, I think, because what you want to create, especially if you want to attract a younger audience, is a sense of belonging, a sense of affinity, right? And how do you create that? You create that by help of tone of voice and by help of sounding like a friend telling you a story. And so much journalism is the opposite. It's a TV anchor with a necktie. Sorry, Rasmus.
Really helps.
And you know, talking to you as this kind of in a pretended neutral tone, like trying actually to be the opposite of a friend. And I think that's why I'm saying, you know, that the journalism crisis is in a sense a style crisis.
Totally agree. And if you do that, the people are willing to pay. So we are able to convert at least every 10 subscriber of the newsletter to a paying member. And the newsletter is for free. And I think it's very important. The tone, like talking to a friend, this is the key, not only the news in the newsletter.
Super. I have two more questions to Katharina and Rasmus. Katharina, the Media Forward Fund has just closed its first round of applications. So there were applications from Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. And just to get an idea of like how many maybe similar ideas to the ones that we have just heard about, or you know, successful startups, because both of you are already doing this for almost 10 years. What were like gaps in the market or audiences that some of the applicants of the Media Forward Fund want to target, and where we can maybe, you know, see media outlets growing to do that?
Well, I'm not really allowed to tell you the concrete applications, but what we see is that the overall quality of the applications is really very high, and we have around 140 applications now, and they are from Germany, about 57%, and Austria almost 20%, Switzerland the rest, and 25%. And they are very innovative, and they have really their audiences in mind. And so we are really surprised and very excited about the response of the first call.
And I think, I don't know, I posted it on LinkedIn. I hope I was allowed to do it. I saw it's like 40 million euros is the overall capital. It's like the capital need if you would give money to all of the applicants.
Exact. That shows that there is a lot of creativity and entrepreneurship, and we need a lot of money to finance all of these ideas. Yes.
So Rasmus, if you hear, both of our panelists have said, you know, tone of voice, being the friend of your audience is very important. I think it's probably difficult to measure that in terms of like, if I find a good tone of voice, then I have an audience that trusts me. Are there other indicators that you know from your work on this, like what, you know, people who already run, you know, newsletters or big or small newsrooms should look at in order to develop a stronger bond to their audience?
Sure. I mean, first, I just want to say one thing other than congratulating you on all the work that you and your colleagues are doing on the Media Forward Fund. But it's really remarkable to think that a single major non-profit news initiative in the United States, in Baltimore alone, has received more philanthropic backing than all the applicants. across the DACH region to your initiative. I think it suggests the point I made about the sort of why we should sort of remember that it's not only the burgers that are bigger in America, the billionaires are also bigger, and some of them are sort of throwing money around in ways that just aren't happening in Europe. And actually, I think sometimes it's probably better for people to get the sort of smaller places to start than sort of having sort of a boatload of cash handed to them on a platter. I'm not suggesting you would ever do that, because I'm not sure that helps people sort of scale in sustainable ways always. On trust, I mean, a couple of things. The first is to say that I think trust and trustworthiness are not the same things, right? So you can trust someone who is not trustworthy. You can also have someone who's trustworthy who isn't trusted. And trust, in a sense, in that sense, is a social fact, right? We can understand, we can research and measure, and in other ways understand who people trust and what they trust and why. That in itself does not tell us whether they are right to do so. That is a harder exercise to do. And we should also recognize that some of the things that drive trust are not necessarily aligned with trustworthiness or always compatible with other journalistic aspirations, right? So, for example, if you are corrective and you're investigating, populist far-right politicians in this country, that investigation and that aggressive holding to account is not necessarily going to engender trust amongst the people who might vote for those politicians. That doesn't mean it was wrong to do it, right? I mean, it's just that sometimes doing the right thing can have consequences in other areas. That said, what are some of the things that we know engender trust? It's familiarity. And I think one of the reasons that many established brands still are more highly and broadly trusted than news in general and than many entrants is essentially is an incumbency advantage. There is an element of snobbery, right? These things help sometimes. In almost every country that we do research on, upmarket newspapers tend to be more highly trusted, even by people who don't read them and for whom they are not meant, than news in general. So there are things that are really not about trustworthiness, but about the way in which society works at large. But I think it points to the importance of something that both of you have highlighted in your own work, is that the importance of trying to start with the people you're trying to serve, right? So leave aside the question of how you get trusted by the public at large, whether that is possible, whether that is even desirable in very disputatious societies that are irreducibly diverse and where we disagree about many important things, often strongly. And start with the people you want to serve, and then try to sort of get to know them a little bit, right? I mean, if I walked up to someone on the street, it might help that I have a tie if I want them to trust me, but maybe we should get to know one another a little bit before I start to ask them to trust me. So familiarity, a sense of who it is that you want to sort of serve. Two things that research finds again and again, including our own, that are very important for forming people's perception of journalism, including why people often have a pretty dim view of journalism, are essentially two forms of authority: expertise and moral. So think about some of the occupational groups that are in most societies highly and broadly trusted. Scientists, medical doctors, engineers. There is in much of the public, rightly or wrongly, a sort of a perception that these people possess specialized, reliable expertise that you are right to rely on if you want specialized, sophisticated jobs done right. And I am here to tell you that much of the public does not necessarily believe that journalists have a specialized expertise. And there are situations in which they are demonstrably wrong about that, because there are things about journalism that are very specialized and that people can be very good at, and where there is a very clear difference between being an absolute amateur and being a very good reporter. But we also need to be clear that the truth of the matter is that a lot of the journalism that people see are written by people in a hurry who have to write 6 stories a day for a website, and who do it on the basis of a press release and a phone call. And we have to be clear, that is not expertise. And people live in the real world, they have their own experiences, and they all can understand that this is not expertise. So expertise is one thing, and I think that is an area where we can see some meaningful differentiation. You can acquire expertise and you can demonstrate it through your work. And the other one is moral authority. So think of other occupational groups that are often highly and broadly trusted in society. Clergy, for example, which is generally, I think, not about people's appreciation of the finer points of theological expertise, but more a sense that they pursue the vocation they pursue because they hold values that people may not share, but they respect. And again, I have to say that this is not the way that journalism is seen. Journalism is not seen as possessing any moral authority. Because people essentially in our research essentially think that news publishers are private companies trying to make money. They're largely right about that. And they often see journalists, if you just think about it, try to put yourself in the shoes of a citizen. If you are like slightly older than the average person in this room, the paradigmatic impression that you have of who a journalist is that it's someone who holds a microphone while looking up at a powerful person. Right? Does that suggest moral authority to you? And again, I think people are essentially wrong about this in a lot of situations, and that is one type of problem. But I also think we have to recognize the reality that journalism essentially often is seen as not having the expertise or the moral authority. And I think the opportunities that news organizations have, where legacy titles have an advantage with their current audience and no advantage at all with new audiences, and all of you are showing every day that this can be done, is that if you become part of people's life, you can get to know one another, they can get to know what to expect from you, and you can show you can deliver on it. If you write about things that you actually know something about, rather than just writing about everything under the sun, because you've got to fill the website with something, and if you are clear about what values underlie the work you do, why you do it, whether those values are an aspiration for impartiality or a moral clarity about your point of view, you have all the pieces you need to earn the trust of the people for whom you work, the public.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. But I'm happy to say I think that both Lea and Simon are around for another 15 minutes. So if any of you want to connect and learn from them, I think there's a lot to learn from them. And I will make sure we will re-invite you for kind of best case and just mutual learning experiences that we really want to create in this space. Thank you so much, Katharina, for being here and presenting some of the work of the Media Forward Fund. And thank you, Rasmus, for doing one of your, I'm not saying goodbye shows, but as an outgoing director of the Reuters Institute, I think it's been a great pleasure to hear your opinions after that many, many years of working with this industry and this profession. Thank you all of you who listen in so intensely. I hope you got something out of this last session of today's conference. Thank you for being here. Please come back. Every Thursday, Publix is running a public program. Ab jetzt, jeden Donnerstag, hier ein öffentliches Programm. Nächste Woche geht's los mit Christian Drosten und Georg Maskelow im Gespräch über den langen Schatten der Pandemie. Wir freuen uns total, wenn möglichst viele von euch wiederkommen zu diesem oder einem der nächsten Donnerstage. Wir haben am Sonntag unseren Tag der offenen Tür, wo wir ganz viel von dem, was Sie heute hier für eine Fachcommunity gehört haben, nochmal anders aufbereiten für alle Menschen aus Berlin, aus der Nachbarschaft, damit die Publix kennenlernen können. Am Ausgang liegen Gutscheine bereit, die Sie entweder selber nutzen können oder an eine Trusted Person weitergeben können für einen Tag Probearbeiten bei uns im Coworking Space. Und ich glaube, es ist jetzt noch Zeit, ich muss meine Kollegen angucken, so für einen Kaffee hier oder so einen halben, eigentlich nicht mal mehr. Genau, wir müssen leider das Haus jetzt ganz schnell leer machen, weil wir umbauen wollen für morgen. Aber eine große Empfehlung ist, einfach nach nebenan zu gehen in die Spore. Unsere Schwester, wo es ein fantastisches Café gibt und immer sehr, sehr interessante Ausstellungen. Und genau, an dieser Stelle danke auch nochmal fürs Dabeisein heute den ganzen Tag und bis hoffentlich bald.